Okay, we got a quorum. Okay.
No, they're not.
Where did City Council Workshop, regular session Thursday, May 20th, 2021 at 5:45 p.m. City Hall, 3300 Corinth Parkway. Pursuant to Section 551.127 Texas Government Code, one or more council members or employees may attend this meeting remotely using video conferencing technology. The video conferencing technology can be accessed at www.cityofcorinth.com/remote session. The video and audio feed of the video conferencing equipment can be viewed and heard by the public at the address posted above as the location of the meeting. Notice is hereby given of a workshop and regular session of the Corinth City Council located at 3300 Corinth Parkway. Call this meeting to order. If we please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. Father, I pray for Corinth. I pray for its staff and, of course, its citizens. I pray that you guide this city. I pray that you bless this community with unity and excellence. And Lord, thank you for your provision of grace and for the forgiveness of our sins through Christ Jesus. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay, workshop agenda. Continue to discuss on policy governance from presentation on March 18, 2021. Mr. Hart.
Okay, yeah, we're on here. What we wanted to do, if you'll remember, from I think 2 meetings ago, I kind of lose track of 3 meetings ago, somewhere back here, and we talked about the framework for the governance policies. And what I wanted to walk through a little bit tonight was to give you some sample policies in terms of executive limitations, governance policies, and delegation policies. And so now there's no way I want to go through all of those in detail tonight, but I wanted to get at least a good comfort level, because I think once you've seen kind of the overview, then we can go back and then we can start having a conversation about what we do here. And so you have in your packet are sample policies. The sample policies, for the most part, comes out of the work with John Carver in terms of policy governance, but it is a compilation of policies that a lot of the cities that follow policy governance and what they use. And so that's the reflection that you're seeing here. And so if we look at on page 3 as an example, where we start to pick up some of the executive limitations, and they're based on the global executive constraints. And if you'll remember, when we talked about this, we talked about the difference between proscriptive and prescriptive kind of policies. So what the policy governance model would suggest is that you want to write your policies in a proscriptive manner as opposed to prescriptive. And prescriptive is where you give the staff permission to do only what you said we could do. Proscriptive is where you set the boundaries, and then you allow the staff then to operate within those boundaries. So we can't violate any of those. So that's what I kind of want to walk through. And this is actually a very good guide to as you begin to develop your own policies. This is what you'd have. So this first one talks about the city manager shall not cause or allow any organizational practice, activity, or decision to be made that's unlawful, imprudent, or in violation of commonly accepted business and professional ethics. And so when we talk, then we move down to talk about the treatment of customers, of services, and then, with respect to interactions with customers, the city manager shall not cause or allow conditions, procedures, or decisions that are unsafe, untimely, undignified, or unnecessarily intrusive. And so it says, so the city manager shall not elicit information for which there's no clear necessity. So that would be like in terms of applying with planning and development within the utility office, and the kind of information we might want when you open up an account or something. So that's where that would tend to apply. So and number 2 is the use methods of collecting, reviewing, transmitting, or storing customer information that fail to protect against improper access to the material. That maintains the confidentiality. So I mean that's a kind of a good example where you begin to see this difference between a proscriptive and prescriptive kind of an approach. And I think you can see how, this can be empowering. It's also, I think, easier from a policy perspective. It's easier to begin to think about things that you don't want to have happen than to think about the myriad of activities that you would permit. And so that's the essence of this. So, and I don't want to read through all of these, but I thought I might just kind of pause there because you've got these in your packet, and if we could kind of look through, like in this case, the first 5, to see kind of your reaction to that. Operate facilities without appropriate accessibility and privacy, and so forth. Are those, what's your reaction to? It's in your packet. Okay, I'm sorry. What was I? Okay. So if you,
I think it's pretty normal business practices.
Yeah, and they're intended. Yes. Yeah. So I don't think any of these. So if we talk about, and we drop down to this second category, is the treatment of staff. And so the idea that one is we're not going to operate without clear personnel policies, an effective way of handling grievances, protection for employees against wrongful termination, and then against wrongful conditions such as nepotism, grossly preferential treatment for personal reasons. And so it's that professional treatment of staff. And then prohibits retaliation against any staff member for non-disruptive of expression of dissent. So let me just kind of pause and you kind of glance through some of those. At the bottom of page 3, then we go up to page, that would pick up all of those on the treatment of staff. And then we flip over to the next section, is dealing with financial planning and budgeting. And so, here's where we talk about we'll not allow budgeting, which has risk, whose situations or conditions described as unacceptable in the executive limitations. So in terms of budgeting and so forth, that we're not going to omit credible projections of revenues and expenses, the separation of capital and operational items, cash flow analysis, and the disclosure of the planning assumption. So I think those are things that you normally accept in the budget and the way we present things. and then that we're going to make good projections for the year. So that's from a budgetary or a financial planning standpoint. The next section begins to deal with financial conditions. And here, these are, again, pretty straightforward, the way that we normally operate here. And certainly you can see where these practices, I think from a staff standpoint, we kind of routinely follow these. I don't think that there's, while we don't have them written, and that's what I'm going to advocate is that we need to get all of these written so it's very clear going forward. But I think it's everything that you would expect today, and there may be things in here that you would want to tighten up on, maybe some things that you'd want to expand upon, and so that's why I'd like to go through these things at least kind of briefly here, so you can get a feel for them. So if we look at financial conditions, does all that look kind of normal? Any questions in those areas?
So, Bob, I have a quick question for you. Under, what page am I on here? Let's double check. Page 5 of 18.
Okay.
I think number 2, under the city manager will not allow personnel access to material amounts of funds. Well, I agree with keeping the boundaries open, and that allows a lot of creativity in the middle. It's when we get to stuff like that seems to be undefined. How would you define material amounts of funds?
That no single individual can do anything. It's going to take a second approval process, so that an investment requires 2 levels of approval. When purchases are made, it requires, for the most part, about 3 levels of improvements. And so you're going to see approval level at the department head level, within finance, and in a lot of cases with my approval, before an expense could be made.
So that would be before any dollars are spent, there will always be at least 2 individuals approving.
There'll be a second set of eyes that would handle that. And that's what I mean by that.
We don't keep, what do they call it, a petty cash fund or anything like that?
No. Well, we have a limited one, but even in that case, it does take a second approval to reconcile and make sure it was spent appropriately. Okay, but that one, it would sound like maybe I want to rethink how we state that to make it a little more clear.
Yeah, the way you described it makes a lot more sense. What that reads to me is that there are amounts of funds that could be accessed by people, and you are restricting that access. Okay. Yeah, no, that and that helps to hear that. So we could word that. And so when we get to the point where we want to start writing these, that's the kind of feedback we want to have. So today, what I was just trying to do tonight was, this is kind of the last part of kind of going through the overview, and then I'd like to take you back through and start to nail these down. And so starting a week from now, we'll go back and start talking about the direction with the budget and so forth. So that's why I was trying to wrap this up tonight, so that we'll start over at the beginning, with the ends statements in terms of where we're going to allocate money and so forth.
Bob, there are the kind of situations that Scott's talking about. Is that something that's reviewed by the audit committee when they come in on an annual basis?
That's part of the internal control system. Yes. Yeah. From that, yes, and that would be some of the reference point there.
Reference for that particular item. Okay.
Bob, I don't know if you're looking for feedback. The only fear I have with this, and I think we definitely need to have some policies, I observe with some frequency that people have more rules than they know they have or that they're able to follow. And so I don't want to create a situation where you have a lot of rules that get put in a book
Right.
that no one really has aware of. And I don't think it's necessarily a concern for a city, but oftentimes I've also observed that these books get pulled out only when there's a problem. And people are talking about who's accountable for that. And then people learn that they were not supposed to allow any access to, like I was looking at the privacy stuff, for instance, and it's like, shall not allow cyber threats. That's not possible.
Yeah. Which one are you looking at? Because that would be... Okay, wait, number 8, for where we are. Allow information files to be unprotected from cyber threats or...
Yeah, I mean... That's not... you see what I'm saying? Like, if material gets stolen, it will be said that it was unprotected.
Right.
So I would want to be careful about how we do this so that we have the minimum number of rules we need and that we don't create rules that we can't follow or that create standards for ourselves that we can't meet.
No, and it's interesting when you bring that one up. I mean, the cyber threats are substantially different today than they were a year ago. But I'm going to suggest to you that if you go back and watch the emphasis that we've made on cyber threats and what we've done on the internal security, all the training, and all of that, we're trying to adhere to this. Yeah, now, but that's a good point, and it's good to review these things, and
it's not a criticism. I'm just sharing my experience.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point because and what it tells me is no, these things are. This is probably about 3 years old. Is when I've been gathering this stuff up. So I really haven't looked at how some cities have reviewed this in the last 2 or 3 years. So this is a good, healthy discussion for me. I like that. Yeah, and cyber threat. We had an article yesterday that I read is that on the cyber threats, we're at the point from cybersecurity and loss that we're actually spending more money now than it's been more of an impact on the economy than what COVID has been. And so if you take like the Colonial Pipeline incident in the last week, those kinds of things, I mean, they're just mushrooming. So, that's what keeps me awake at night is that kind of stuff. So, okay. So that would get us to the bottom of page 5, where it talks about the succession, some of the succession planning, making sure that we've got people that are knowledgeable about what's going on. So, if I'm run over or have a heart attack tonight, or that people are aware of what's going on, and so we don't have unnecessary gaps, and so that's how we would interpret that. And so then we get to the 6. We deal with. So I'm just going to, compensation and benefits. So I think here we pretty well follow most of those. Is just a matter of normal practice. And here are a lot of them. The ones that jump out is I can't do anything with my own salary or benefits. Y'all are the only ones that can. That I'm not going to get any benefits or get treated any different than any other employee. So I follow all the same kind of things everybody else does, as an example. And then when we look at, we've got a good benchmark cities that we compare to, and so that's how we tend to operate. And so that's what most of that area is saying. I think when you get down to the bottom of page 6 and up here and a lot of page 7 is the communications, and that's one I think we'd probably want to have some conversations about reporting back what's going on, what kind of information I'm giving to you on a regular basis, and so forth. And so, and I think that's always it's an area where we probably need some conversations, Then when we move from those are dealing with your executive limitations. Then we move over into the governance process. The governance process is really how y'all are going to operate and how you're going to govern. And so the style that you're going to have is what we pick up there on page 8. And that's where there's always, I think you could have some good, healthy conversations in those areas. And this could be a whole host about how you address each other. In council meetings, what the interaction with staff's going to be, with the public, how you're going to use workshops, how you might want to use committees, and so forth. They're all addressed in these kinds of areas. On page 9, then we talk about the job description for the council, and then your code of conduct. And this is always the time you want to do a lot of that when you don't have problems. So you can, it's not aimed at anybody. So that's always a help. Do what? You better. When you get over on page 10, I think it talks about council engagement. And so in here, I tried to adapt some things to a little bit of what goes on here. But, for y'all to talk collectively about what it is that your expectation, how much you want to be involved, like in TML, the TML region, at the Council of Governments, at the National League of Cities. So you've got all these areas in which you can be involved, and I don't know what your expectations are, and I don't know that we've really ever had a real good conversation. We've kind of touched in and out of it, but and then the last year has just been crazy for all of that kind of stuff. But you can see I've made some references to the National League of Cities, to the Texas Municipal League, the regional meetings. Part of the problem in the regional meetings here is they meet on Thursday, which is the same night we meet. So that makes being involved in the region very difficult. But then the legislative policy committees, and then COG, the North Texas Commission, and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunities to be involved in some of these processes. We get to 11. We talk about some of the annual planning that you would do. A lot of that's how you use the advisory boards. How do you get input? How do you think about some of those kinds of things? Then the role of the mayor. We pick up there at the and to clarify those. Bottom page 12, we pick up the council committee principles. And I think that's one that we've kind of talked about off and on. From a policy governance standpoint, I've always discouraged those because you really ought to be operating as a council as a whole, not individual committees, and so this picks up a little bit of that kind of a notion. And then over on 13 is recognizing that there is a cost to governance in terms of the training and the time that you invest in learning about what's going on around the state, and really to help your strategic thinking. And that there is some time that's got to be devoted, and there's some cost associated with that. And so thinking about that. So as we go into the budget, this is an area where I think you'd want to really spend a little bit of time about, what do you want to do with some of the TML training and so forth, and to think about that. And then we get over to page 14. We get into the delegation, and so this is that third broad area that we talk about now. Talk about how you delegate authority, how you would hold me accountable in terms of what's going on, and then how you would want to monitor my performance. And so in terms of what reports and what kind of inspections you'd want to do, and to have you think in those kinds of terms. Just saying, kind of going back to your point, you don't want to wait for the mistakes. Part of this is to kind of think about and to make sure that we're all clear on the expectations in those areas. So, and then when you get to 16, then you can see how you might want to think about how often you'd actually work in those areas, and whether you'd want some of these reports annually, quarterly, semi-annual, and so forth. So, but this is a good sample. That way you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'm always for plagiarizing a lot of this, but
Professionally plagiarizing.
yeah, major. But I think it's a good guideline, and you don't want to just gloss over them and say, "Oh yeah, these look good," and go on. You really want to spend some time having some conversation and thinking about and making sure. Because what you say here is what I want to follow, and I want to make sure that I'm consistent with what your intent is, and that way, in that sense, we're in sync in terms of what's going on. So that's what this whole governance thing is so that it puts the burden on you to be very clear about your expectations, about where you want to go in the community, where your priorities are in terms of spending resources, allocating monies, and so forth. And then how we're going to carry those out. And so that's what this idea is about. So the next item that kind of pops up here, I think, is very consistent with all of this, and that is, in the last year we've been doing a lot of these meetings on Zoom and so forth, and so I was going to have Shay to come up and talk a little bit about how you want to think about these meetings going forward. Do you want to? We're back in here on a live kind of a process, and we can. Continue to do some of these things on Zoom. But that's what I'd like for you to have a little bit of discussion on here for a few minutes. Just see. So there you are, and I'll let Shay kind of walk through this. But we want to really think about how do you want to continue these meetings for the folks that aren't here. So.
Thank you, Mr. Hurt. Mayor, City Council, just want to take real brief 5 minutes of your time to kind of go over these video streaming options, and then just kind of have you give us some guidance, some layout of where you want to go in the future. Hold on just a second. Just give you a real quick background. If you'll recall, March 2020, Governor Abbott issued an executive order that provided an exception for the Open Meetings Act that allowed us to conduct these sort of open meetings over teleconferencing. And this exception will, I believe, continue until the end of the COVID disaster declaration, which we're not 100% sure when that will expire, but that's when this exception will expire. So currently we utilize Zoom Webinar. But on top of that, with the cameras that we had installed back December last year, we also have a streaming service called Swagit, which is a little bit of a goofy name, but it's actually a really good product. Swagit is a one-way streaming service, so think of it like YouTube or something like that. There's no way for people to interact with us back. Zoom is a two-way communication, so if a resident's at home or staff or developer, we can unmute them, we can hear them in the chambers here, so it's a two-way communication. So we have a few options for you, each with their pros and cons. First is 100% in person. So we just go pre-COVID, where we say if you want to participate or watch, you have to physically be up here. Obviously, one of the pros is no cost, but it's not exactly flexible and wanes in the government transparency department. Option 2 is we just utilize Swagit to stream one way. We just push it out, and so folks can watch from home. But if they want to participate during public hearings or citizens' comments or something like that, they would have to physically come up here and participate that way. There are costs associated with maintaining Swagit, the hardware and the software, but it's relatively easy for us to maintain. We already have it in place back there AV-wise, and allows for a lot of flexibility and transparency. A sub-option for Swagit is this video on demand. I just wanted to put this on y'all's radar and just let you know that this exists. Swagit will archive all of our videos, and so you can go back and watch, say, last week's council meeting. It ties in very nicely with our agenda management thing. You can click on an individual agenda item, and it'll fast forward to that timestamp in the video. So if you're like, oh, all I care is about business item 1, I can go directly to that. We don't have it turned on at the moment. I mean, we still record, we just don't have it published anywhere, but wanted to get some insight from y'all and see if that's something we want to publish out to our residents.
Would that not be easily published on the city's YouTube?
We can do it through YouTube as well. We don't currently, but we absolutely could.
Because if you're using Swagit with the video on demand option, we would have to host those videos.
We currently do, just as a package that we pay for these cameras and for the one-way streaming option. They sold it to us in a single package, and so they have cloud storage that we are subscribing to currently. We just don't advertise that we have it to.
But how would our citizens access it if not through our website?
So we would, in our website, on our agenda center, that's exactly where they would. They would go to the agenda, and there would be the agenda, the packet, minutes, and then another link for video. And then finally, option 3 is just kind of status quo, what we've been using for this past year, which is streaming out via Swagit for those that just want to watch, not necessarily participate, and then also providing a Zoom link for staff or for members of the public that want to join in, be unmuted, and speak. There are additional costs for maintaining our Zoom licenses in that regard. And it's a little bit cumbersome for us to use AV-wise. It's not impossible, but a lot of moving parts. But it is the most flexible and most transparent of the 3 options. Yes, ma'am.
Were you saying on option 2, when you stream the one way, that if I'm watching, you can unmute me and I can talk even during the option 2?
No, ma'am. With option 2, it would be just watching. If we want to provide the option for folks to be able to be unmuted and speak back to us, we would have to go option 3.
And what is the cost associated with the Swagit and the Zoom?
So Swagit is approximately $14,000 a year, which sounds high, but that's the cloud storage that they use to store all of our video sessions. And then Zoom is approximately $1,800 a year, I believe.
How long do they stay stored? I mean, or how much can be stored? And how long is it stored for?
I'm almost positive they told me at one point, but I have forgotten. I will certainly get you that information. I believe that it's indefinite.
As long as we're paying, or
As we're paying.
Okay.
If we decide to terminate that, they have the option where we can download all of those videos, and so we can retain what we currently have hosted up there if we want to retain it for archive purposes.
So right now, essentially, we are using option 3.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thanks, Shay.
You bet. Yes, sir.
So my my question in trying to decipher all this is, so we have a workshop going on right now. If we were discussing an item and I was a member of the public and I was in the audience, could I stand up and raise my hand and speak?
So via Zoom, there is an option, Zoom webinar specifically, there is an option to raise hand. And so we only unmute folks during certain portions of the meeting where they can't interject in the middle of a meeting.
Okay, let me interrupt you. I'm not getting there yet.
Okay.
The software and how all that works, I get that pretty much. What I'm talking about is the laws or whatever that govern us having a meeting and how that works. Where I'm going with this is my short time on the council. It appears to me that when the public is allowed to speak is the 3 minutes during a specific point in time during a regular session.
Yes, sir.
And so there's no other time. So what I'm trying to figure out is, why do we need Zoom if there's only one portion of time during our meeting that you have a 3-minute?
I'll defer to Bob.
Under the open meetings law now, an individual can speak on any agenda item. So a resident can ask to be heard on any agenda item. So it's now on the citizen's request or the citizen comments, then they can talk about anything that's not on the agenda and just bring any issue they want to before you. And so that's why that's on there. But they also have the opportunity to speak on any item, whether it's a public hearing or not.
So let me be sure I understand, Bob. So if I came to the meeting tonight at 7:15 and item number 2 is something I wanted to speak about as a citizen, I can fill out the paperwork or whatever, and when that item comes up, then the mayor's going to say, we have Steve here and he wants to speak about item number 2, and I can speak about that particular item?
With the new law, basically, we have to allow input on each and every item. So some cities were only allowing input on public hearing items, and some cities interpret the new law to mean it's only on actionable items. I don't think it's quite that clear. So generally speaking, anybody can speak on any topic that's posted on your agenda. I think what this is going to really is the timing of it, because we have this under citizens comment, any items, you basically tell them that they can talk about any of those either now or during that agenda item. And when the law changed, that's consistent with the new law. It was because what was happening was councils were putting citizen input items at the end of the agenda. They were only taking comments at the end of the agenda, and so they had gone through everything before they let anybody speak. So what you can do now is you can let somebody, if I have to go to my son's baseball game, I can come up, speak at the beginning part of comments, even though I'm talking about item number 22 that's not going to come up till 2 hours when I'm gone. So under the new law, anybody gets to speak on any agenda item. It's more of a timing thing with regard to the statement that we have on our agenda. Workshops are a little more gray because they're a workshop session where y'all are supposed to be talking amongst yourselves, hearing that input from staff. So generally speaking, our workshop items end up being on a next agenda. So people would get that chance to speak at that next agenda, or they're on the same agenda. So if your concern is people not being allowed to talk, then certainly once we get to an actual regular agenda item, then our process has been that we will let them speak when we have a regular agenda item.
And from a technology standpoint, there's nothing saying that we have to do it via Zoom. Since we're having open meetings here, they can physically come and speak during public hearings or citizens' comments. Zoom is just something that we offer as just an additional piece for folks to participate remotely.
But to my question, and the reason for my question was to figure out what do we need to provide. And I was kind of under the opinion that, from, again, my limited knowledge, that one particular time during a council meeting, you have 3 minutes to speak about whatever, and that's all, then we plan a certain way for giving access. If I could, as a citizen, speak on any topic at any time, well, that opens a whole nother can of worms as far as I'm concerned as to how and how long and when do we provide services to the public to be able to speak.
It's just a very narrow portion inside the agenda during citizens' comments and public hearings that we flash something up on the screen that says, if you'd like to speak, raise hand. Click the raise hand button in Zoom, and then we unmute them one by one. It's not terribly utilized. We don't frequently have folks in on Zoom. Some nights we do. In fact, we found out the hard way that P&Z meeting for the Oakmont development, we found out that we had a hard cap at 100 because we had literally 100 users in. We've since upped it to 500 users. So
that's what I was remembering was that meeting.
That one meeting.
How often would that come up? But when it does come up, I think we need to be prepared. And so,
Sure.
$1 million question is how much do we spend in preparation of that and then never use it?
So Zoom right now is approximately $1,800 a year, and then Swagit, like I mentioned, was about $14,000, and that's to maintain the hardware, the software, and the hosting portion of it. So the videos that we're putting up on their service to host out. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm sorry.
So I have a question. On Zoom, you can record your meetings.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you take those and put those recordings on our website? I mean, what would be the advantage of paying $14,000 a year for to stream it when we can record it and take that recording and put on our website?
So we could take that recording from Zoom, probably host it via YouTube and put a YouTube link up on our website. The reason why we're going the Swagit route is we got the cameras in there and the control system, and it was an all package deal. They wouldn't sell us just the cameras in order to do that. They had to do the hosting portion as well. And so if you eliminated the hosting portion of it, then we no longer have the cameras. We might be able to buy the cameras off them. I'm not 100% sure. Get some other comparable thing where we can control the cameras from back there, have a little bit of a production value. Otherwise, we'd have to go back to the remember the OWL camera that was up here, which did the job as just patchwork, but the production quality wasn't great. It wasn't designed for a room this big.
So are you saying that this is the only place we can get a camera? I mean, there's got to be other places we can get cameras from that we don't have to pay a hosting fee.
Certainly, we could do that. Yes, ma'am. We could go out. Like I said, we could either try to sever the contract with Swagit and see if we could purchase the cameras and continue to use the control software, or if they said no, it's a package deal, all or none, then we could go out and try to find something comparable that would not have a hefty annual fee associated with it.
Yeah, and Tina, when we did this is when we were trying to do all these meetings remotely. So we signed up for Swagit. We paid for that with COVID money. So, so that's kind of, that's what's so different now. And now, as we start to emerge from this, the issue is, do you want to continue to do the recordings and have the meetings online where people can participate from home? Or we just turn the cameras off, and if you want to participate, you come in person like we did before COVID.
And on that note, with the COVID funding, we pay for 2 years up front, so we're paid up with Swagit until December of 2022.
How much benefit is to the staff to be able to go back to those videos and look at the council meetings and things? Is that something that's a very critical resource for you?
I might defer to Lana on that. I'm not sure if you go back for...
Yeah, I think when you keep the minutes, that's all we typically go back and we look at.
And we're not legally required to. So the Texas Open Meetings Act requires cities to maintain video and audio recordings of all their open meetings and post on their website, but gives an exception to cities under 50,000. So we're not legally obligated to do any of this.
I guess this might be a question for Mrs. Bunzelmeyer, but in the communications department, do we get a lot of requests at all from the citizens of Corinth to have this service available to them?
We haven't specifically put out any type of information to get feedback to see if the residents like this service or not. We do get comments about individuals, liking this service where they can log in from home and be able to view, the council meetings. It's a convenience for some of the residents. So we have had little impact, but we haven't done a citywide question on the service.
May I make a quick suggestion? Since we're paid up for 2 years, I think the way things are going is Zoom and this type of stuff is going to be here to stay, and I think people are going to be expecting this. And so what I would recommend is let's continue doing what we're doing. We can set a governance policy for how council's going to use Zoom. But if we have people that want to present that, we have workshop sessions. Somebody's not flying in here from Houston. They'll present via Zoom. I think if we record those, stream them, put them on YouTube, that'll give us 24 straight months to see if that doesn't help to increase our citizens' engagement, if it, get to know us a little better. And then we can have an in-depth discussion at the end of that 2-year process when we want to decide if we want to repay for it.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, Mr. Garber, we would...
Option 3.
Option 3 with Zoom and Swag It, but then on top of that, post it on YouTube as well?
I think posting it to the city's YouTube, because that's where we're posting all the rest of our stuff. I think we would be remiss not to have one easy place for people to go subscribe to the City of Corinth's channel, and we have playlists. That's how people access videos now.
That's easily achievable, sure.
Yeah, I agree with Scott. I don't see why we would take away, access for someone to be able to participate if they want. I mean, historically, since I've been on the council, not a lot of people have shown up, in person. If you get a few more that start logging on and just, kind of watching it through the Zoom link, and that seems to be the least expensive between the two anyway. It was $1,800 a year. I think by taking away an access point for the citizens is probably not the best way to go, because, like Scott said, I think the virtual is here to stay.
Sure.
Any other comments from council?
I agree. Given that we kind of already made the investment, let's get a good body of information out there, see how the citizens react.
Sure. So if I'm understanding the consensus, we'll go option 3, and since we're paid up on Swag It until 2022, we'll reconvene before our contract expires and kind of figure out at that point where we're headed with Swag It.
And part of our governance discussion, maybe we can set a couple goals on what we would like to see be achieved from that investment. And then we'll measure ourselves against it.
And you're going to put it on YouTube?
We'll start uploading those videos that we record up to YouTube as well. Yes, sir.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. Do we, any council members need any discussion on the topics for tonight's agenda? No? Okay. At this time then, we can go right into our regular session. So I will close the workshop and I will open the council meeting. And the first thing we have on the agenda is a proclamation. Mental Health Month in the City of Corinth 2021. Whereas addressing the complex mental health needs of children, youth, families today is a fundamental to the future of the City of Corinth. And whereas the citizens of the City of Corinth value their overall health and that of their families and fellow citizens, and are proud to support observances such as Mental Health Month and Children's Mental Health Awareness Day. And whereas 1 in 5 adults has a diagnosable mental health condition, and whereas only half of Denton County parents are not familiar with mental health services in their community, and whereas the need for comprehensive, coordinated mental health services for individuals and family places upon our community is a critical responsibility, and whereas there is a strong body of research that supports specific tools that all Americans can use to better handle challenges and protect their overall health and well-being, and whereas each citizen, local businesses, schools, government agencies, healthcare providers, and faith-based organizations shares the burden of mental health concerns and has a responsibility to promote mental wellness, recovery, and support preventative efforts. And whereas the Denton County Behavioral Health Leadership Team, Denton County MHMR Center, United Way of Denton County, and the Wellness Alliance for Total Children's Health of Denton County, led by Children's, through their unique partnerships and prevention-based approaches to serving children and the adolescents, are effectively addressing the mental health needs of children, youth, and families in our community. And whereas it is appropriate that a month should be set aside each year for the direction of our thoughts towards mental health education and the support of treatments and recovery. And whereas it is appropriate that a day should be set apart each year for the direction of our thoughts towards our children's mental health and well-being, and therefore be it resolved that I, Bill Heidemann, Mayor of the City of Corinth, do hereby proclaim May 2021 as Mental Health Month and May 7th, 2021 as Children's Mental Health Awareness Day, and I call upon our citizens and all agencies and organizations interested in meeting every person's mental health needs to unite this month in the observance of such exercises, as well commit the people of Corinth to increasing awareness and understanding of mental health, the steps our citizens can take to protect their mental health, and the need for appropriate and accessible services for all people mental health conditions. Signed this 20th day of May 2021. Is there someone here to receive that? Okay, then you'll just send it to them? Okay, thank you. Citizens' comments. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Comments about any of the council agenda items are appreciated by the council and may be taken into consideration at this time or during that agenda item. Council is prohibited from acting on or discussing items brought before them at this time. Mrs. Wiley. Mr. Shea. Do we have anybody online?
There is no one online.
Okay, thank you. Okay, consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted in one motion. Should the mayor or a council member desire discussion of any item, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Item 5, consider and act on the minutes from March 18th, April 1st, and April 15th. Consider and act on an agreement for auditing services for E.D. Bailey, LLC. Consider and act on the professional services agreement between the Corinth Economic Development Corporation and Envision Planning Group, LLC. Item 8, consider and act on the ordinance number 21-05-20-14, amending ordinance number 20-09-24-31, adopting the fiscal year 2020-2021 City of Corinth budget and annual program of services to provide for the expenditures of funds from the Economic Development Corporation Fund for the purchase of property from TxDOT and increase in revenue for the sale of property to DATQ and providing an effective date. Number 9, consider adoption of resolution number 21-05-20-17, providing for denial of a rate application submitted by Encore Electric Delivery Company, LLC, and authorizing participation in the Encore Cities Steering Committee for the review before the Public Utility Commission of Texas. I entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion? Cast your vote. Okay, it's unanimous. It's 4-1. Okay, public hearing.
Excuse me, Mayor. I think Tina had a question.
Well, no, I just couldn't. It's all consent, and it's a lot of consent. And like number 7, I don't remember us going over that. And so that's why I said, no, I can't approve 7 until I know exactly. And I should have read my packet better. So that's why I said no.
But let me just explain. That Envision is an individual that I'm using to help principally with conversations with Metroplex cabinets and with Wolverine. And in the absence of having an economic development director, they're providing some of the assistance that I need to keep things going in the interim period.
Okay. Okay. At this time, item number 10, conduct a public hearing on an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Corinth, Texas, repealing and readopting Section 130.04, curfew for minors, of Chapter 130, offenses against city regulations, of Title 18, general offices of the city's Code of Ordinances in its entirety, to establish an enforceable curfew for minors within the city and providing an effective date. Mr. Hart.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'd like to have our Police Chief, Jerry Garner, to lay out this item for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. There is no action you have to take on this tonight. This is going to be coming back before you in June. Basically, the juvenile curfew ordinance, Corinth has had one since 2005. We've had the one that we currently are using since 2009. And basically what the ordinance does is prohibit someone who's under age 17 from being on the street or in a public place, pardon me, between midnight and 6 a.m. There are exceptions to it, such as for a medical emergency, or you're with your parent, you're going to work, you're coming home from work, you're going to a religious activity or a school-sponsored activity. But that's the basis. There's also a piece in the ordinance that you can fine a parent if they knowingly and negligently let their child be violating the curfew. State statute requires that every 3 years, a municipality, a place that has a juvenile curfew ordinance, needs to take a look at it, see how it's working, see if they want to keep it. If they don't decide to do that, it just expires after that length of time. We don't write lots of tickets on this. It's a tool for an officer to contact a young person who's out in the middle of the night and basically find out how old are you and what are you doing. It's used as an investigative tool, although summonses do get issued on it, not a whole lot. That basically is what the ordinance is. We have found that it is a very valuable public safety tool for us, and as your staff, we would recommend that this is something that council continue. But that's my presentation, unless you have a question.
Does council have any questions for the chief?
I'm sorry, I don't have a question. I did not know about this ordinance, and I think it's probable that my daughter and her boyfriend have violated it. And so I did have some concern, if they're legally operating their vehicle and they're out with permission. I think my daughter has definitely probably violated it, if I understand it correctly. In other words, if just legally operating your car in the street after midnight, that's happened.
And technically, it'd be a violation. But what the police officers use it for, as your common sense would tell you, we've got kids that are loitering in the park or loitering in a parking lot. It gives us cause to stop and say, what are you doing? It's kind of like, bad dog, go home, or something like that. But we don't write lots and lots of tickets on it. It's an inquiry tool more than anything else.
Yeah, and that would be my only concern, though, is if you're legally operating your vehicle going somewhere, and because there's an exception for interstate travel.
Yes, sir.
I understand that if that's used technically, that means like traveling through the state as opposed to intrastate, which is like within the state. So that would be my only concern, that, and or there's some exception, like if the kid is not violating if they're on, in other words, I understand, to me there's a difference between I'm parked somewhere
Yes.
and hanging out and I need to be sent home, as opposed to I'm following the speed limits and I'm going from point A to point B.
And I think, as all of us have heard, and we've probably all said, nothing good happens for kids after 12 midnight. That's what we're looking
said that, and
that's
my father said it to me. Yeah. Okay, that's my only comment.
Thank you, sir.
So, Chief, do you have a summary of the summonses that we've written
Yes, sir.
due to this?
And I think you received earlier something that Captain Tyson
Right.
put together for you. And to give you just a quick example, real quick like, in 2020, we wrote 13 tickets for curfew violations,
Right.
which was way up from the year before. But if you'll remember 2020, COVID, kids were home, they were bored, and they were getting out and about. But I was talking to our municipal court judge about, well, what do you do with a kid that comes to you in front of you with a violation? And he couldn't remember one coming before him with a violation, because very frequently these get disposed of at the prosecution level of kind of like, naughty, don't do this anymore. The judge told me I would probably give them a small fine in public service, go pick up trash or something. But
So
we don't write many.
Looking at the agenda packet that was presented, the majority of would not be a situation that Sam presented, nor would it be the cross-country club that needs to start practice at 5 a.m. in order to get miles in. These are consumption of alcohol, tobacco, criminal mischief, burglary of vehicles, and I know we just caught a few. I don't know if they were minors or not.
One was a minor out of the three.
And so I do share, and I shared this 3 years ago when we voted on this, that I would hope that this ordinance is used for investigation, and I would hope that it's used if we're going to summon somebody, that it's in addition to another law that's been broken.
And that's generally what's been happening. It's you're in possession of a narcotics device, a small bit of marijuana, alcohol, something like that. It's normally not just something that, well, you're out too late, now you're gonna get a ticket. It's kind of like it's intended for somebody who's apparently up to no good. You're cruising a neighborhood, you're three young men together, and you're out looking in cars, this type of thing. But we're not out looking to stop kids that are coming home a little late from the drive-in movie or the Sonic or whatever. That's not what we're trying to use it for.
Sure, and I'd also like to point out that the actual juvenile arrests are down by less than half from where they were last year, and this is 2020 where a lot of kids weren't having to go to school.
That's true.
And so I hope that's evidence that over the last 3 years this has been working.
It seems to for us. Like I say, the main thing, and I think Mr. Burke and I were talking about this, it gives us cause to stop and say, what are you doing? Why are you out? If you don't have a reason to be out, you need to go home. That's the primary use of it.
So, Chief, did I hear you right? Is it 17 and under or under 17?
Under 17. Under 17, you're considered a juvenile. If you're 17, you're okay. But if you're under 17, you and I are okay. We're all right.
Okay.
I have been in Sam's shoes before. Before the judge.
Not taking you too far off the subject, but we've had parents tell us that that's something I use with my kid to get him to get home when he's supposed to be. I tell him the cops are gonna scarf you up, but we're probably not.
You're threatening. Are there any other questions for the council? Being this is a public hearing, we can go ahead and have it, or do we have to wait till 7?
Just open the public hearing, and then we'll see if anyone
Okay.
has any comment.
Okay.
There's no action on this. We have to have 2 public hearings, so this is the first of the 2.
Okay. All right. At this time, I'll open for public hearing on this item. Is there anybody here that wants to speak on that? Is there anybody online that wants to speak?
No one has requested to speak online.
Okay. All right. Close the public hearing. Do we have, and we don't act on it tonight? This will come, okay. All right. Business agenda, consider an act upon the alternative compliance tree preservation application for the removal of and replacing of protected trees, 6+ caliber inches, located on plus or minus 36.220 acres within the proposed Walton Ridge residential subdivision, consisting of 164 residential lots and 10 open space lots, generally located north of Walton Drive, south of Blackjack Lane, Sand Jack Drive, and Danbury Cove Circle, east of North Corinth Street and west of Shady Rest Lane. AC 21-004, Walton Ridge Alternative Compliance Tree Preservation. Mr. Hart.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'd like to have our planning manager, Michelle Mixel, to lay out this item for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Council, Mr. Mayor. The item before you, Walton Ridge, if you recall, you saw this for a plan development redesign amendment back in December 2020. It's for it was for 164 lots, just east of the just east of the proposed city center. Let's see. The property is located, as mentioned in the agenda, just on north side of Walton Drive. The request is for alternative compliance approval. It was considered a catalyst in terms of residential density for what's going to happen, hopefully, in this town center. The preliminary plat was approved by Planning and Zoning in April, the preliminary plat, and it's also a part of, if you recall. Okay, now the mouse is working. If you recall, NCTC property, as well as a portion of the Metroplex Cabinets Hans property. So the applicant had originally expanded their property from what had been approved in 2019 for the PD. Civil engineering plans are currently under consideration, and we're reviewing those administratively. I bring up the point that the land area was expanded in terms of the PD redesign because that's significant in terms of the canopy cover. You can see that the site is heavily treed, and the canopy cover currently, with the addition of the land area, is now at 46.45, and our current ordinance permits a 50% reduction of the mitigation for trees at 50 or 51%. And so with the addition of that land for a public purpose, really to help spark what our interest was in terms of the community for economic development and so forth, by adding that parcel, the land area was reduced. And just to remind you also, because this application was in the queue for so long, our prior practice of exempting protected trees which are 6 inches and greater within proposed right-of-way or utility easements, building pads, and so forth, that would be exempted off the top. So with that said, the coverage at 46.45%, the applicant is requesting that the City Council consider the tree to be heavily treed, and rather than applying the 50%, honor a 46% reduction, and you'll see the numbers, and you have the detailed information in your packet that was provided. I won't go into all of the calculations, but it is something that is significant for this application, that request be honored. So by summary, if you recall, the PD that was approved back in 2019 retained 0 protected trees on site. They were permitted to, completely clear the site, and that's what had been planned. They came back to the drawing board with us in the early part, the fall of 2020, and through December agreed to redesign a bit and include a neo-traditional or more new urbanist design, which had the homes fronting on the Muse lots, where they were able to protect 56 well-established mature trees in a grove, and that's going to become a key feature of their site. They're also, as part of the application, requesting that they be permitted to replant the required mitigation after assuming the 46% reduction at 791 caliper inches, which equates to 214 trees. So there, you'll see that this is the preservation area, the 56 trees within the Muse lots. So I take it for you in gradually adding in color. And then the common open space lots, they have the Muse, they've incorporated linear spaces along the entranceway and so forth. They have detention areas, but they're proposing to replace 112 4-inch caliper trees, so they're actually upsizing, so the trees will have a greater impact when planted. And they're also adding 65 trees along the right-of-way. If you recall, the streetscape is a little bit different from what we're accustomed to, in that we've permitted them a unique design through the PD to allow on-street parking with protected bump outs, and they're going to plant replacement trees within the streetscape to create that more urban comfort along the streetscape. And then also to meet their mitigation, they're adding 37 trees. Now, what I just talked about previously in the common open space, the developer is putting that up front within the design. After construction of each of the homes, because of site disturbance, the builder will put in 37 trees. And in your packet, it's noted in detail. It's hard to see here, but they're scattered along the 80 foot lots toward the north. So they're adding in 4-inch caliper trees. Again, they're creating an upsize. And then also along the corridor as you come in, and certain other trees along the side lots. So the applicant was able to meet all of the mitigation rather than paying a fee in lieu of. So for a full amount of 214 trees, staff is recommending approval as presented, and that council grant the removal of the protected trees and the replacement plantings as outlined in your application packet, and in more detail on the alternative compliance worksheet contained in your packet, and that you understand that no fees are being required because all of the caliper inches are being replanted. And John Arnold, the applicant with Scoreboard Company, is here for any questions.
Does council have any questions?
I just have a comment. I really like the way that you put the 56 trees in the grove. That really gives it it's an urban feel, but it's a homey feel too. And I really think that adds quite a bit to your design.
We've enjoyed working with them as well, staff. So.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I'd entertain a motion on that item.
Mayor, I'd move that the application for alternative compliance be approved as presented.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Cast your vote. It's unanimous. Okay.
Okay, item 13, consider an act on the nomination, appointment, resignation, and removal of board members for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Mr. Hart.
Okay, Mayor, as all of you know, that Lindsay Baker has resigned from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and so what we're asking that you consider is to move Wade May up from one of the alternate positions into that position, and also to appoint him as vice chair of the commission.
Okay, is there any questions from the council members? If not, I'll entertain a motion on that item.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we move Wade May up from alternate to voting member, and I move that he be appointed the vice chair of the Planning and Zoning Committee.
I second.
Is there any further discussion? Cast your vote. It's unanimous. Item 14, consider an act on an interlocal agreement with the Lake Dallas, Hickory Creek, Shady Shores for the consulting services of Marketplace City to identify potential broadband providers. Mr. Hart.
Yes, Mayor and Council, this is an interlocal agreement that would, and actually the interlocal agreement is with the cities of Hickory Creek, Lake Dallas, and Shady Shores, when we would contract with Marketplace City. There's no out-of-pocket cost for us, but this is part of the broadband strategic plan, and it would help us to identify potential ISP providers or internet providers in this area. And if you'll recall, we did an ILA at the last council meeting with Mighty Rivers, and that's working with some of the financial backgrounds with some potential providers as well. But we're having them work in tandem. And so this ILA would allow us to move forward with that. We'll also have a report on all of this at your June 9th joint meeting with the 4 cities. So we're bringing this to you as an ILA, and it's us contracting with Marketplace.city, and then the ILA then is with the other 3 lake cities.
Are there any questions for the city manager?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Bob, is it possible to get a quick update, maybe not now, but in a future workshop before the June 4th meeting, on the information that was brought up during the technology, the internet? Because I think only Kelly and I are the only 2 that may have been involved. Kind of where we're at, there's some web resources that the council has access to. That way, when we show up to that June 4th meeting, we'll kind of all be abreast.
Okay. Let me get Yeah, I can do that on the June 3rd. I was trying to decide whether we had a meeting between now, but I can do that on June 3rd, and then June 9th, you'll hear you'll hear some of the same things.
Sure. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay. I'd consider a motion on that item.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the interlocal agreement with Lake Dallas, Hickory Creek, and Shady Shores for the consulting services of Marketplace.city to identify potential broadband providers.
Second.
Any further discussion? Cast your vote. It's unanimous. I was remiss. We kind of forgot.
Go back and pick up item
number 12. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Okay, and that's consider an act on an ordinance number 21-05-20-15, amending ordinance number 21-03-18-10 by repealing Section 2, City Facilities Mitigation Efforts in its entirety,
to remove face mask requirements within the city's facilities and reopening city facilities beginning June 1, 2021. Mr. Hart.
Mayor and Council, this is going back to the emergency declaration and the ordinance that you did as a result of COVID. And what we're coming to you tonight, and this is based on, I think, the meeting from a couple of meetings ago, is that we would repeal all of the elements of that ordinance except for that base declaration to help protect the federal funding that is tied to that under the American Recovery Act. And so we would go back to, effective June 1st, go back to a green, I think I said green and gold level, but back to the green level, so that and then based on the governor's executive order the other day, then no mask would be required for any of the city activities, and so we'd be really fully open.
Is there any question, council? Entertain a motion on that item.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 21-05-20-15.
Second?
Okay, any further discussion? Cast your vote. That's unanimous. Council comments and future agenda items. The purpose of this section is to allow each council member the opportunity to provide general updates and or comments to fellow council members, the public, and or staff on any issue or future events. Also, in accordance with Section 30.085 of the Code of Ordinance, at this time, any council member may direct that an item be added as a business item to any future agenda. Mr. Burke.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Garber?
Nothing, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Holsworth?
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Mrs. Henderson?
Of course I do. Now, I just want to remind everyone that Tuesday night, the 25th, we have a mixer that is sponsored by CoServe, one of our Corinth businesses, and it's going to be at the Butterfly Garden here in Corinth. So it's from 5:30 to 7:30. Everyone could attend. I'd appreciate it. And then we do have ribbon cuttings for 3 of our Corinth businesses at 11 o'clock a.m. on the 27th out at Millennium. There's going to be Bones Burritos, Doggy Wonderland, and Epic Nail Bar. And if y'all could attend, that would be great.
What time?
Tuesday is 5:30 to 7:30, and Thursday is 11 o'clock a.m. You get free lunch, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Pickens.
I have nothing, thanks, Mayor.
Mr. Hart.
Just a couple of items, reminding you about the joint council meeting on June the 9th. I think we'll be finalizing all the agenda, but I think it's going to be an extensive agenda. We'll deal obviously with the broadband issues. We'll also have a little bit on the Digital Ready Communities program, the emergency management, a little bit on some joint policing efforts. So I think it's going to shape up to be a great meeting with all 4 cities. And then I'd like to get some, if some of you are able to attend, the ribbon cutting or if you will, the groundbreaking for the Lake Ralph Hall on June the 16th. So, and the reason, just to kind of get a head count on that, is for transportation purposes. And if we want to, because we're going to try to take a bus or 2 buses up collectively from the member cities.
I'll be able to go, and would also just like to note that is my birthday. And I could not think of anything that I would rather do more than a grand opening for a new lake on my birthday.
Well, you're a boater, aren't you?
Well, yeah, I used to be. Plus, the water's pretty cool, so.
You can put me down also, Bob. I'd like to go. Thank you.
I can attend as well, Bob.
I can attend.
Do we have to post this now?
We'll do that.
Okay, I'll go too. How long a ride is it up there?
Well, it's kind of up in the general. It's a little north of Bonham in that area. So what did that put you, about an hour and a half?
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. It's at 10:00. I believe it's 10:00. So that's going to put us leaving here about 8. Well, yeah, about 8. Now I'll have a little bit more detail on that. So that may interfere with some of you. The ceremony itself, I think, will take about 30 to 45 minutes, and then a couple hours back. So we're going to take up a lot of the day like that.
All right. One of the things that I would just like to give the council update on is that this last week I attended a mayor's, city manager's meeting over at the safety building on the emergency management, and I was really impressed with the information that was presented to us. But the one thing it really did point out is that if the Lake City's ever had a tornado or any type of other disaster hit us, we are at a very limited knowledge and organizationally very limited in terms of how we would be able to react to it. And I really compliment the city managers for bringing this issue to the table, and that hopefully through these meetings that they'll be able to put together a formulated plan that will be able to address these issues if this should ever happen. Again, God forbid it ever would, but I think good planning gets you better results. So, again, other than that, we have to go into closed session. And I believe in closed session we're going to be talking about Section 551.071 and Section 551.072 and also in Section 551.087. So at this time we'll be going into executive session at 7:12.
land located at 608 South I-35, Corinth, Texas, H. Garrison Survey, abstract number 507, tract 8F.
My second stance.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Cast your vote.
We can't vote, Mayor. We may have to raise hands or something.
Oh, okay. Okay. Call a roll. Mr. Wiley?
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Garber?
Yes.
Mr. Holsworth?
Yes.
Ms. Henderson? Ms. Pickens?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Okay. At this time, we're adjourned.
I apologize, Mayor.
No problem.